Even in the offseason of college football, there's always breaking news. 2024 is going to go down as one of those moments 50 years from now that we look back and say, I remember when, because of how much change is coming to our favorite sport. Nick Saban's no longer running the show in Tuscaloosa. Michigan won a national title without its head coach for 6 games, who then promptly decided to head back to the NFL. The Pac-12 no longer exists. The two flagships of the Big 12 are now joining the SEC. NIL and the transfer portal are running rampant, and now we have news on the future of the college football playoff. It was officially approved this morning, the 5-7 model, 5 conference champions, 7 at-large bids. And so my question is, who are the biggest winners and losers in all of this shindig? Let's go ahead and discuss. But if you are new here, welcome on into the channel. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling us your thoughts. Who are the biggest winners and losers of this 5-7 method? Hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode that we're doing here over on YouTube. Go ahead and follow me on social media, Twitter, X, Instagram. Slide in the DMs. I love having conversations with you, and I turn them into one-off videos whenever I get that question from you. So please make sure that you continue to follow me on social media. Hit the subscribe button and tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, best of bros, college football aficionados everywhere about this channel, because we're on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking about our favorite sport daily. Winners and losers of the 5-7 format. So let's just go ahead and break this down before we go any further. Unanimously, the playoff committee said this is the best course of action moving forward. This is what we have to do if we want to contain validity, stability, and honestly, a little bit of cohesiveness. 5 conference champions, the ACC, the Big 10, the SEC, the Big 12, and 1 group of 5 school, 1, will automatically make it to the CFP. 4 of them are going to get a bye. I can tell you this right now. You go 11-1, you go 12-0, you end up winning your conference title. If you're at a Power 4 school, welcome to the bye week. Florida State, this is for you because, last season you got told your quarterback not being on the field isn't going to hurt you. Well, it did. It actually cost you a college football playoff spot, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you look now, the 7. The 7 is where it gets really interesting because those are just the 7 most qualified teams or the best teams or the teams that bring in the most revenue. Who knows what the playoff committee is going to do? But it's 7 at-large bids. So who is the biggest winner? Number 1, the SEC and the Big 10. Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey are probably 3 steps away from creating their own Super League, where they will ask and invite teams that they think are qualified to join their own little rascals type of He-Man Woman Haters Club and create their own version of college football. You don't want that to happen because you still want to have a collective balance between the group of 5, the Power 2, and the Elite 2. That's what I'm going to call it from here on out. The Power 2 and the Elite 2, because that's what the SEC and the Big 10 are. So Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey, who are going to fix college athletics, basically are making sure that they are the most represented. They bring in the highest revenue. They have the highest TV media rights deal. They have the best product, usually in terms of ratings and in terms of on-field production most years. And they want to be represented. So naturally, if you look at the SEC and the Big 10, you're automatically going to get 2 conference champions in. I would be very shocked if you don't at least get 3 more teams from the SEC. So those would be 3 of those teams mentioned. And at least 2 more teams, if not 3 of those teams, in terms of the Big 10. So let's just say, for funs and giggles, you look at the SEC. Alabama ends up winning the conference title. Well, Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, Texas A&M, some years Florida, Ole Miss, and probably you can throw in randomly every once in a blue moon Kentucky will battle it out for 4 spots. And then in the Big 10, let's just say Ohio State runs to the table. Well, now you bring over Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. They all can be competitive, along with Penn State, Iowa, every even year Northwestern, maybe Nebraska. And those teams are now going to schlum it out all the way to fight for a national title. They're going to be the most represented. I can promise you this. Of those 7 spots, 4, if not 5, will be automatically promised to the SEC and the Big 10, which then hurts other opponents, guys in the Big 12 and guys in the ACC. We'll get to that in a moment, but the biggest loser of all is actually Notre Dame. Notre Dame, in terms of making it to the college football playoff, not a loser whatsoever. They're a winner. They actually are. I did a one-off video talking about this. I believe Notre Dame, so long as they stay as an independent out of a conference and make their schedule the way they have the last few years, 10-2 will probably get you in the playoff. It may get you an 11 seed, but it'll get you in the playoff. 12-0 is going to get you in the playoff. 11-1 probably is going to get you in the playoff. And Marcus Freeman's the right guy. Everything now is about building off of the recruiting. If they can do that, they're going to be 10-2, 11-1, 12-0 every single year, which means they'll be in the playoff. Here's why they're losers. They can never host a play. They can never get a bye. They can never get a bye because they're not a conference champion. So Notre Dame does win in terms of, yes, they are going to be a team that vehemently makes it to the CFP because of their record, because of the pageantry, because of the accolades, because of the pizzazz, the persona, but they're never going to get that first round bye. They could go undefeated. They could be 12-0, run through the table, number one scoring offense, top 5 defense, have an elite offensive coordinator that's about ready to be hired by insert power 4 team here, and they're still going to be left out of the CFP because of they're not in a conference. This is either going to lead to them eventually joining a conference, which I don't think happens until they're forced to, or it's going to lead to them hosting a lot of playoff games in that first round. I don't know if you've ever been to Notre Dame Stadium. It is a beautiful campus. It is a wonderful moment. It is a part of college football history. It gets loud inside of South Bend, Indiana pretty quickly, but I can promise you that a lot of players would love to be able to have that bye week, get their minds and bodies right instead of continuously hosting a playoff game. You don't join a conference, that's what's going to happen. Another winner, conference champs in lesser tiers. Hi, Florida State. Remember last season when you went undefeated and you lost your quarterback and you didn't feel good because Tate Rodemaker also got hurt, so you had to turn to Brock Glenn, and you screamed to the mountaintops, we belong in the college football playoff, which you did. You belonged in the conversation for the college football playoff, but last year was probably the epitome for anyone who hates expansion to learn to shut the hell up. I had to be a proponent of that. I am not a fan of expansion, but I have said if we were going to have a middle ground, it would be 8 teams. This is why you need expansion. So now, let's just say that you are Florida State. Let's just say you're Utah. Let's just say you're Kansas State. Kansas State, the redheaded stepchild that's always just kind of caught in the middle of a rock and a hard place. Not an elite team, but never a bad team. Let's just say that they end up winning their conference. Let's just say they end up going 11-1 or 12-0, like you saw last year. They're going to get a bye because of their conference, because of the fact that they were able to handle business against everybody else. They will get a bye. And so the conversation now turns to, are we oversaturating with SEC teams or with Big Ten teams, or are we not paying enough attention to ACC teams or Big 12 teams? But nobody can complain because of now as a conference champion, you were rewarded the fruits of your labor. Florida State falls in this category. Clemson falls in this category. North Carolina, Utah, Arizona, Colorado to potentially, Oklahoma State, TCU. Every year, we're going to talk about the SEC and the Big Ten basically one-upping you in every single area. Well, now the one thing that they can't do is get 2 teams with a bye. They can get 1 team, but the other ones, best of luck to you in the open field. Some of you are going to be playing a conference game in a conference playoff game. So that's just the way it is. Loser, multiple G5 conference winners. The reason I say this is because of, if you go back and you listen to what I said, when it comes to the SEC and the Big Ten, it's going to be very hard pressed to imagine a world where they do not have the most representation. Maybe it's 6 of the 7 teams, maybe it's 4 of the 7 teams, maybe it's 5 of the 7 teams. But depending on what the ACC and the Big 12 look like as Power 4 conferences, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. So let's just say Utah ends up playing against a very good 11-1 Kansas State team, and they're 11-1, and they go 11-2. Are you going to count them out because of they did their job but lost twice? What about in the ACC? What if Miami, a team that I am very high on going into this year, ends up over-dominating? Let's just say they go 11-1 too, but they lose to Clemson, and Clemson ends up moving on and they get the bye. Are we really going to penalize Miami for losing a game that they weren't promised at the start of the year? And the reason that hurts is because, well, Tulane could get in, Memphis could get in, UTSA could get in, San Diego State could get in. You could probably even throw in Boise State with a brand new quarterback and with a brand new head coach, but probably not 2 of them are getting in. So that means that when you look at the Sun Belt Conference, Conference USA, you also look at the Mountain West and the AAC, one of them is going to have an elite type season for guaranteed promise. Outside of that, nothing is promised, including multiple G5 winners getting in. It just feels like the way that the conference schedule is, depending on how we view the other two conferences that are considered Power 4, they're probably going to get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. That's not a bad thing if it's some years you look and see a bunch of 11-1 rosters, but on the years that you do have a 13-0 squad that did its job and handled business, even when they had to play tougher, rigorous competition on the road and they pull off an upset, they're not going to be rewarded the same way that a Power 4 school is. Another winner is conference expansion fans, because you want to know what's going to happen? Just to guarantee that they are always going to be in the hunt, we're either going to get a new college football playoff, because remember, the deal's not signed yet. Everyone's talking about this ESPN deal, but according to Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger, nothing is promised. Everything is in the works, but nothing is guaranteed. So we got 2 years of this playoff. If you're a fan of wanting to see your team join the SEC, the Big 10, or maybe even the Big 12 or the ACC, that way you are promised at least a spot in the conversation. This is where expansion happens. If the Big 12 and the ACC realize the only way that we're going to garner the same amount of respect as the Big 10 and the SEC is by keeping this expansion plan, then we're going to go out and add more. Maybe it comes with the Sun Belt. Maybe it comes with Conference USA. Maybe the Mountain West. Maybe we finally get back to Pac-12 at some point, which we won't, but never say never in the world of college football. What eventually happens is that you will see the Power 4 expand more teams, which does lead to basically a Super League without really being called a Super League. A loser, Oregon State and Washington State. Yeah, see, the Pac-12 still exists, according to George Klykoff. I mean, I don't really understand. Like, they came out with an announcement, a week ago, saying that he was going to be relieved of his duties at the end of the month. 10 teams basically said, we're already done with you, George, so best of luck in your future endeavors. But Oregon State and Washington State, the little engines that could and were the loyal squads, are now going to be bent over a barrel because they're not promised anything. The entire argument when it came to the 5-7 model was what happens with the Pac-12, because we only have 2 teams. So Oregon State and Washington State, they're still technically Power 4 programs, but they're not promised a spot in the CFP. So if they run through the table of their Mountain West schedule with the matchups that they're playing against other Power 4 teams, and they end up going 10-2, that actually ends up hurting them than it does helping them, because they don't have the guaranteed right to play in a postseason game. They have to be perfect. They have to be elite. And they have to show, not just in terms of record, but also in terms of numbers, strength of record, strength of schedule, all of this aside, just to fight for a spot in the national championship. So Oregon State and Washington State lose either way, because if they join a conference, i.e. the Mountain West, like they're playing in the schedule this year, they're now a non-Power 5 school. But if they stay idle, well, they're a Power 5 school that isn't promised a spot in the CFP. And if they go, say, join the Big 12, maybe eventually they could find their way in the CFP, but it's going to take a very, very, very long offseason, a couple of off seasons to kind of get this together. Another loser, Cinderella teams. Guys, I've had a video on this before. I have no problem saying this. There is no such thing as a Cinderella team anymore, because what defines a Cinderella roster? When you look at the NCAA March Madness, you'll every once in a blue moon see a 12 upset of 5, a 13 upset of 4, a 15 upset of 2. Every millennium, we'll see eventually a 1 seed lose to a 16 squad. And then you start rooting for them. They start going further. Well, do you know who are going to be the 11 seeds this year? Or I guess what you could say being the 15 seed? It's going to be Penn State. It's going to be Ole Miss. It's going to be potentially Miami. Maybe if you look at Utah, if they don't win the Big 12, Iowa, Nebraska, you're going to say probably Tennessee. Those are your Cinderella teams. Like, the one squad is the Group of 5 school, which we all can agree, maybe finds a way to get an upset at some point if they're not the 12 spot. Outside of that, the Cinderella teams, the ones that are playing on the road against high-tempo competition at a university where they will be behind enemy lines, is Alabama, it's Penn State, it's Tennessee, it's those squads. The ones that we talk about on the regular. There is no more such thing as a Cinderella squad. You can't say that there's a Cinderella squad in a 12-team playoff, because the teams that are going to be represented are probably really good. You throw them in the ACC, how many of these teams that are 9-3 go 12-0? You throw them in the Big 12, how many of these 10-2 squads in the Big 10 end up going undefeated? You throw them in the Mountain West, what are we looking at? Monumental numbers that would put them top 5 in every conversation possible. So you can't have a Cinderella squad when a team's playing against quality competition. They're just not the best on that day. So the bottom line is that the term Cinderella, you got to throw it out the wayside. If we're going to throw the Pac-12 and say that it's extinct, Cinderella squads, they also belong in the same category. But there you go. My winners and losers of the college football expansion 5-7 model. SEC and Big Ten are going to be well represented. Notre Dame, welcome to the party. Never going to get a first round bye. Conference champions in lesser tiers. Florida State, you're not going to be bent over a barrel like you were last season. Multiple Group of 5 school winners. Yes, you will. You will be bent over a barrel. Conference expansion fans. Eventually, we're going to get to the Super Conference, so just give it a little bit more time. Oregon State and Washington State. Thanks for being loyal to the Pac-2. Here's your reward. Nothing. Absolutely nothing is promised to you. And last but certainly not least, Cinderella teams. If you believe that the ball drops at midnight, you live in the past because there is no ball. There is no Cinderella. There is no midnight. It is just a dark, gloomy cloud for those rosters that you want to see exceed expectations. Make sure that you hit the comments section. Tell me who was the biggest winner. Who is the biggest loser of the college football playoff realignment? Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, best of bros. The drunk dude passed out in the Waffle House parking lot about this channel. We're on the race to 2K. We're on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking college football daily. Follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson, Twitter, X, Instagram, link right down there below. Email me. I'll turn your videos into questions. And until next time, I'm Cole Thompson. See you later, folks.